lesson that shaped me by everyday example.
But did last night and did this week do enough? Joining me now from Charlotte is Jonathan Capehart, an opinion writer for the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor, and Margie Omero, Democratic strategist. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jonathan, you were there last night. Did Romney succeed in selling himself to the American people?
I'm not sure. I mean, you can't sell yourself to the American people on your likability when you know that you are, the latest poll shows that he is the least popular nominee of either party in the last 30 years. This is something he should have been working on over the last 6 years that he's been running for president. You can't change those likability numbers with one speech. Although we did see some, glimpses of humanity, some glimpses showing us that, family really is the fuel behind this guy. But I'm not sure if it's going to be enough to turn at least the likability issue for him around in time for November 6th.
Well, let me go to you for a minute. I want to ask you something, Jonathan. But Margie, let me put this in context. New York Times has a piece today where it makes the case that voters' emotional connection with the president may be central to his election. Let me read to you in part what it says. It says, Romney still needs to tackle the harder job of convincing those Americans who were so emotionally invested their hearts in President Obama 4 years ago that it is time to accept that his presidency didn't work. Let go of him and move on. A large portion of wavering voters maintain a personal attachment to Mr. Obama and a tentative willingness to give him more time to get it right. That emotional attachment is the thing that I think Mr. Romney was trying to go after. Do you think he was at all effective?
Look, I think there were some nice moments in this speech. I love the story about his parents and the rose. Ultimately, though, Romney has been net unfavorable since January. I mean, really a pretty sizable gap. I mean, before that, it bounced around. But he's been net unfavorable for a month. So it's not like he can just do one speech and that's it. Now, it's all going to be okay. I mean, it's a very big pattern to overcome and something he'd have to maintain until November. And the other thing about that clip you just read, it's not just about an emotional connection only either. It's also about which candidate has the policies that can really speak to the middle class. And Romney didn't address that at all really in the speech. And it's something that whether he addressed it in the speech or not, clearly that's not where his positions are.
Now, Jonathan, there was a biographical video on presidential candidate Romney that was shown last night that did not make prime time. Right. I thought it was very effective. I thought that had it made prime time, it would have done a lot for him. Let me show a clip of that because most Americans didn't see this last night.
Craigie, hi. Oh, Craig, don't support me.
I hate to say it, but often I had more than 5 sons. I had 6 sons.
How you doing, Knuckle Snorts?
He was really playful.
It's like,
Mitt would walk in the door after work, leave the briefcase at the door. That was it. Never thought about work again until he left in the morning.
I mean, that video showed a real human side, him with the kids, him with the grandkids, really kind of made him a real human being. Yeah. And why they opted to put Clint Eastwood on rather than the video on when they went prime time in terms of the networks, I heard someone say this morning it was campaign malpractice. It was crazy.
It was a bad move. I wrote a piece earlier this afternoon that said what would have been so much better was to get rid of Clint Eastwood altogether, have Marco Rubio give his fine speech, and have the ending of his speech set up in a way, the video, then have the video play, which was, I agree with you, was incredibly effective. I thought it was very powerful and really did show you aspects of Mitt Romney that you've never seen before. Could you imagine Mitt Romney coming onto the stage at the end of that video, the roof would have been blown off the Tampa Bay Times Forum if that had happened, and they didn't do that. They squandered a major opportunity.
Yeah.
And by the time he gave his speech and the balloons fell, I mean, really, the enthusiasm in the convention hall was just not there. It felt like the kind of, a party that you would go to for a coworker that you kind of liked and you thought was nice, but you didn't really admire the person or love the person. It was, there was no feeling there.
That's probably how you behave. I don't go to parties of people I feel like that. But Margie, let me say to you, let me ask you this. He mentioned, Jonathan mentioned Rubio. One of the things that I noticed is that most of the main speakers spoke more about themselves than they did Romney, which also feeds into likability. I've never seen a convention where everyone was like casting their own kind of biographical sketch in front of the public, other than maybe Ann Romney. Do you think we'll see that mistake at the Democratic convention, or they'll be a lot more strict and a lot more on message in terms of President Obama, his record, and what the policies represent?
Well, I'd like to think that the Democratic convention, you'll see more speakers on message. Certainly when you have a lot of different speakers, there's some unpredictability at both conventions. I think ultimately you're going to see at the Democratic convention people talking about the clear difference between the two candidates and some specifics about what it means for the middle class. I mean, the middle class, unlike what you heard at the Republican convention, the middle class really blames corporations, Congress very specifically, big banks, and President Bush more than they blame Obama. There was a Pew poll last week that showed that, and I think you're going to see some of those things mentioned in the convention this week.
Jonathan Capehart and Margie Omero, thank you both for your time tonight.
Thank
Have
you.
a great
Thanks
holiday
a lot, Rev.
weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Still ahead, Governor.